This episode of Twin Cities Trekkies is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor before, let me explain. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that help you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership required. They'll also help you to distribute your podcast so it can be heard on many different platforms, such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's all you need in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. All right. Welcome to episode 11 of Twin Cities Trekkies. I am Wes.
And I'm Kenzie.
And today we're going to talk about how do we introduce new people to Star Trek. I think this is a really good topic to discuss because there are new fans every day. Things that they discover it by accident, or they go to see one of the Star Trek movies, or they watch Star Trek with their friends who are Trekkies, and they're going like, I kind of like this. I want to see more. So this was actually inspired by a friend of mine who the other day was stuck watching Heroes and Icons here in the Twin Cities area, and it happened to be on Star Trek The Next Generation. And she said to me, this is interesting. Maybe I want to watch more. So I thought this was a really cool, interesting topic to discuss. We can talk about how we should introduce how we individually can introduce people to this, as to other fans of the show. I mean, how to get new fans in the show, because eventually the old people are going to be unfortunately dying out, and we need fresh blood to take their place.
I mean it goes like more than just like being like, how do you get people into, but like, how would you even introduce something, or how do you even go about bringing someone down a nice path of opening up the Star Trek universe to them. And we've kind of touched on this in previous episodes about just like certain movies or certain episodes that definitely feel like a good way to kind of jumpstart somebody's interest in Star Trek, like an easy way for them to get an idea of the universe. And that's a part of how I even rank some of the stuff I really like movie wise and episode wise, because I'm like, this is something that someone can watch without knowing anything about Star Trek, or this is a good way for them to understand kind of the whole universe that is Star Trek. So I personally am not a big I could never be a saleswoman. I'm not a proselytizer about anything, because I've had too many people like absolutely not like the random things that I like. So I never go into anything being like, I'm gonna get you to like this. It's like, I know no one's gonna like spiders or critters or IDing plants or whatever. So Star Trek is one of those things too where I know you're not. I know you don't like Star Trek, but I will show you things about Star Trek that maybe you'll be like, heck yeah, whether it be a potential romantic interest in a show where someone gets really caught up in that, which I have a story about, as well as just a movie where they're really like, oh, that was a really cool plot. Like, it's like, well, guess what? It's actually based off of an episode of the original series.
Yeah. So to get in touch with us, you can email us, tctrekkiespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Handle for both is TC Trekkies Pod. I pretty much get us active on Instagram a lot, so whenever a new episode is available, I usually take the screenshot from the episode I have on YouTube and put it up on Instagram to say, okay, this is what the episode's going to be about, kind of thing. I just tell you like where to find us and stuff like that, what the topic is, stuff like that. So it's a really general thing, pretty general. Same thing with YouTube, the Facebook page, that kind of thing. You can also find us on pretty much every platform. You can leave us voice messages on the anchor.fm website for us, anchor.fm/TC Trek, Twin Cities Trekkies, excuse me. So if you want to leave us a voice message, leave us voice feedback. I can gladly pull it out, and we play that as feedback, but keep in mind that any feedback you do leave on any platform, such as YouTube link to the episode, Facebook or Instagram, or even on Anchor, just keep in mind that your comments may be used in a future episode. All right, so let's talk about how should we get fans into Star Trek. Like I said at the top of the show, it's based on an idea that my friend who was stuck watching Next Generation one night thought this was cool, and she thought, okay, maybe I'd be interested in learning more. So how shall we introduce fans to Star Trek without being there's one thing I really want to say is that we should not be pushy.
Yeah, no proselytizing. I never want to twist someone's arm to like something if they don't like themselves. I feel like one of the key things to look at when I've been interested in getting people into Star Trek is what do they like in a show in the first place. Like, I had a friend who she never really watched any sci-fi, but she loved like American sitcoms. She's from Norway. Mm-hmm. And she really liked Voyager. We particularly watched there was one, I can't remember the specific episode, but we had watched a few. We just were kind of like binge watching it one summer, just hanging out together. And she started really liking the idea of Chakotay and Janeway having a thing. She got really excited about that. And for me, it sucked because I didn't want to break it to her that that's like not a thing. But she had a lot of hope for it. And she's like, this is giving me some like really good American TV vibes. And I just really like the dynamics of these characters. And I really like, like B'Elanna and Paris and like all these people too. So I'm into this. And she started watching it on her own, being like, I really like this. And I like the Doctor and I like all these characters. And that is mostly because she had consumed a lot of American TV with a certain type of arc to it that got her interested. And I think if she would have tried watching original series or Enterprise, I don't think that would have been necessarily the same way, like as the feel that Voyager has. Maybe Deep Space Nine, I feel like could have similarly gotten her in, because Deep Space Nine has some pretty good like inter-character like romances and stuff, like Dax and Worf and everything like that you can get kind of excited about. But that one was definitely where I'm like, you have to kind of look at what they're interested in out of a show, or like what they're getting out of the entertainment that they seek.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, pretty hard.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I have done what you said, be pushy. I have actually been a little pushy, especially to my wife. Granted, she's only seen she's only seen the movies. She's never seen the TV shows. I mean, she has seen, I think, probably 5 of the movies, like the 3 Kelvin timeline ones, and then some of the prime timeline ones. She got mad when Spock died in the Wrath of Khan, and I was like, here's Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. He comes back. So, but yeah, unfortunately, I have pushed Star Trek on people, going like, because I want to be able to talk to people as like, hey, this is something I like. Why don't you like it with me? You can talk about it. We can talk about it. So, and unfortunately, I have been a little bit pushy, but I'm trying with my friend. It's like I'm trying to think, okay, what would be the best way to keep her interested in Star Trek, but also not be pushy.
Yeah. I feel like one of the biggest thing is curating episodes, or giving them like episodes that are just like crowd pleasers, or just generically like I definitely always recommend Star Trek 2009 to be like, all right, like watch that, and if you like that, then go watch Wrath of Khan, and then or go watch Into Darkness, and then Wrath of Khan, and then watch like Space Seed. Like do something with those. Like that's nice.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a good way to like introduce it. Otherwise, I show them my favorite episodes, or I'm like, oh man, if you want to watch it again, here are my favorite episodes, and you can watch that. Like, but I've never been one to just I just personally have a hard time. Like I would try to get kind of like get people pumped about Star Trek. Like I like talk it up and be like, heck yeah, I love it, and here's why. But I just would never try to convince anybody to actually watch it and be like, nah, it's probably not for you, and play that more like being like, I don't know, it's up to you. I don't really know what you're into, but here's why I like it. So if that sounds interesting to you, go for it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. And like, it's just, I mean, we can like, for those new fans of like, stuff like that. I mean, divulging a little bit, we do have a kind of an audience with this podcast right now.
Yeah.
We actually do. It's a small audience who actually like Star Trek, including some people in our in Hennepin Healthcare's ambulance EMT officer contingent. This is actually from the same source as my friend who actually got stuck watching Next Generation. She says that some of the people from the Hennepin Healthcare EMT people have actually listened to our podcast because they're fans of Star Trek themselves. So
yeah, and I've had people who have changed over time, like or they've watched something like you remember Tony from college?
Yep.
One of my boyfriends that I've had, he originally actually hated Star Trek to the point where he was sort of like a teasing back and forth with us, where he really liked Star Wars. He was one of those people that like the whole like binary of it's either this or that, like it's Star Wars or Star Trek. And I'm like, why not both? Definitely both. Like I'm like, I like both. And he would constantly try to like pitch that whole, nope, you have to choose one or the other, Kenzie. And if it's Star Trek, I hate Star Trek. But he got into it after the fact. He really got into Star Trek later on, like actually probably more so after we broke up and we're just friends, but he really got into it. And I'm not sure what his story exactly was on how he started really getting into it, but he started watching Next Generation and he really liked Picard. And then he started really getting into some of the episodes and story arcs of that whole series and got really excited about it. So he's one of those people, like when Discovery was first announced, like he, like messages me to be like, oh, did you see this? Or like the movie announced or something, like messaging me about that, like getting excited about Star Trek. And then he was really excited about Into Darkness. Like when that movie was announced, that he was really into Benedict Cumberbatch and was like, oh my God, he's going to be in here. It's going to be so sweet. So I think for some people, it could just be something as simple as an actor that's in it that someone's really excited about. Like my best friend who does not like sci-fi totally watched Star Trek 2009 because of Chris Pine. She liked Princess Diaries, The Royal Engagement, and was like, yo, I like that guy a lot, so I'm gonna watch this. And then we went in and she's like, that was really good. I can see why you like Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, I can always give them like a list of episodes. If you're into Next Generation, if my friend ends up watching more of Next Generation, I kind of want to like warn her about the poor quality of the first 2 seasons of Next Generation, relatively poor quality. I mean, there are some gems in those first 2 seasons, like episodes like where no one has gone before, Conspiracy, Skin of Evil, that kind of 11001001. I mean, that's one of my favorites from season 1 of Next Generation. And there's episodes from season 2, episodes like The Measure of a Man, Q Who,
Q Who,
Contagion, the one with the computer virus, and stuff like that. I enjoy with the Iconians. I like that one. And then Times Square, the one with the 2 Picards. I like those. So and just try to tell them I kind of want, if I want to like introduce people to like, okay, Next Generation is the show I grew up on, but Deep Space Nine is my Trek now because I like DS9 more than Next Generation now, but
Yeah.
I would tell them, like, here's my favorite episodes from Next Generation. Here's ones I think you would enjoy, that kind of thing. And she told me, it's funny. She told me that when the episode she was watching, she said, like, oh, this is like a commentary of contemporary times. And I told her the next day when she came back, when she came back to visit me, and I told her, like, Star Trek has always been a commentary on the current times of political, social,
literally
economical.
A reason why the original series cast was cast the way it was, like, being like, that is representative of a currently broken world of Earth. Like, that is why the crew is the way it is.
Yeah, and that's why the show has been so popular for the last 55 years.
Yeah,
is because of that. And I tell people this all the time. I mean, and that's kind of like, sounds like I'm gatekeeping a little bit when I say this. It's just the Kurtzman era of Trek is kind of going back to that. I mean,
yep.
Some of the messages in the shows now, like Picard season 1, for example, with all the synth band and stuff like that. That's pretty much a contemporary message about what's happening down at the southern border of the United States.
Yeah. And there is like a lot more, like, that's another aspect to consider, the political aspect. Like, some people, that's a turnoff. Like, they don't want to watch something, they're looking for escapism. But for some people, that's a key interest, to be like, hey, there's like a lot of political commentary that I'd be interested in seeing how they delve into it. Like, one of the reasons why I particularly like Next Generation was for episodes dealing with the rights and sentience of Data, like treating him as a sentient being, having rights as an individual and unique being, and just a lot of commentary on how you treat like anomalous cases or things that fit the normal narrative of what we perceive as life, or what we perceive as having rights, or what's the right thing to do. And for some people, that's like, they don't want to watch a show where that's what they're talking about. But for some people, that's like, wow, that's really exciting. Like, in college, you watch that episode of the trial of trying to, with Maddox trying to say, like, hey, I want to take Data and take them apart,
Yeah.
And Data being like, I'm not really into that, but I can't really say anything, because technically I am not somebody who can have say on that, because I'm just property. And then Picard being like, no, wait a minute, no, you're not. Let's make sure that we can define this and make sure you have freedoms. And we watched that for class around, like, what does it mean to be alive, and sentience, and the future of technology, and if it ever gets to that point. There were a lot of people in the class that had never seen Star Trek. I'd seen the episode, and I'm like, oh yeah, perfect way to have this conversation. And there were a lot of people that left class that day being excited about probably watching Star Trek, being like, oh, I think I'm gonna look into this Data guy. He's pretty cool. Like, that's a pretty cool conversation. I have technology and what if conversations about the future and sentient electronics. Like, let's do it. Let's watch Star Trek and learn about Data.
Yeah, and I thought and that's a good one, because like, if you watch the episode and you watch the first season of Star Trek Picard, it's pretty much a continuation of that story, because a whole bunch, because the synthetic life forms attack Mars in the first season. It's the repercussions of that after Starfleet decided to help the Romulans out, because their star was going to go supernova, and then the synths attack and they decide not to do it. So
yeah,
it's pretty much a contemporary thing. Like, this is something that Guinan did warn Picard about. If you got a whole bunch of data that's all disposable, you don't think about their right. You don't think about their rights. You don't think about their welfare, and that's pretty much what happened, unfortunately. I mean, granted, it was probably a Tal Shiar programming of them that caused them the attack on Mars. We don't know exactly what caused the destruction of the Utopia Planitia yards in Picard, but what caused them to do that? But it's just like you see all these commentaries now about, in Star Trek now,
Yeah.
that's the sense
that like treating people with a right to life, whether you're a good person or considered a bad person, there's still conversations around, and that's commentary to now, which a lot of people are interested in learning about. So definitely another aspect of getting someone interested in the show, when it's like, hey, you want to see a futuristic take on other issues that are similar to now?
Yeah.
Take a look.
Yeah, take a look at Discovery Season 1, for example. The Klingons and, the fear of being diluted. That's pretty much what was going on in this country during the height of the Trump presidency.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even the producers had said the Klingons in Season 1 were based on Trump supporters. That's what it was. That's what they had said it was. So, and you watch it now, you're going like, yeah, it makes total sense. So, yeah. And I know my friend is very much into politics, that kind of thing, political things. So, I can always show her like episodes that are dealing with ethical, moral, political dilemmas that are in every show. Yeah, I mean,
because that's the conversations I've had, like with people where, like, they are talking about something, and I use an example of Star Trek as like an example of that situation. And it's like, this is a really great example of that. Like here in the one Star Trek episode, people like, oh wow, Star Trek talks about that, and it's like, yeah, you should watch it. It's good. And then that's, I mean, catching somebody's, it's mostly just piquing people's interest. Like if I'm ever going to get someone interested in anything, it's just usually seeing how genuinely excited an individual is about something in the first place. Like I've never intentionally tried to get people into moths, but I've sure had a lot of people message me about moths and take time to take a picture of like a bug because they're like, hey, you post a lot about this and you seem to really like it. And now I'm kind of interested because I see that you're really pumped about it. And I think that goes for any sort of interest. Like when people have certain interests, like people kind of feed off of the energy, excitement of seeing someone really into something. Like it makes you excited about it too when someone's really excited.
Yes, totally. Yeah, that's how I felt like when my friend said like, oh, that's cool, I'm glad you watched it and liked it. I mean, I'm trying to like, okay, let's see what I can do I'm trying to think, what can I do to encourage you to watch more Star Trek? So that's how I feel. And I'm really happy that, I know that I'm glad that we, I'm glad we actually are a voice for those people with this episode to like say, okay, here you go. We're going to try not to be pushy on you. And here you go. We can show you how we best go about showing you how to like Star Trek without being pushy or preachy to you.
Yeah.
And I hear that comment all the time. Well, Star Trek's not a political show. I'm sorry, but it is sometimes.
But I've definitely had people who don't like Star Trek because of that. Like being like, I don't want to watch a show that reminds me like escapism. Like my dad actually in the later years of watching it for a while kind of dropped off from watching Star Trek and the later stuff because of that. Like he's like, I spend every day stressing out about what's happening in this world and, getting really anxious about what does the future look like. And it's really hard to watch a show that also subsequently reflects that when I'm like, I gotta watch other sci-fi that's a little more like less on the nose of current political issues and a little more out there or even comedic just as like escapism. And so it's one of those, and I don't know how to convince my dad to like Star Trek, but it's definitely one of those things where people kind of ebb and flow with their interests based on what they're looking for out of entertainment. Because not everybody's really, like, not everyone's super into fandoms either. Like, I've met people who just don't get attached to a fandom. Like, a lot of my friends that's not what they do. They're not like really into Star Wars or they're not really into like certain Disney stuff. They're just like, I don't know, it's cool, but I'm not like, invested in
Yeah.
it. Like, and there are some people who are super invested in fandoms, and they are almost like vehemently so. Like the Star Trek versus Star Wars stuff, where they're like, I won't like Star Trek because I like Star Wars, and those are the ones that I won't. That's where I'll try to get a little preachy, because I try to convince people to break that. I mostly don't try to get new fans of Star Trek, and I try not to really push people to like Star Trek. It's more so people who are aware of it and choose to not be into it because they like something else. And I'm like, you can have both. You like both. Like, you do not have to like one or the other. You could definitely like both, and it is okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you and I are in that boat of liking both. I mean, granted, I have not seen the other two anthology Star Wars films. I've only seen all 9 episodic ones, at least once. So, but I still like Star Wars. I mean, I'm excited about that universe being expanded. That universe being expanded on Disney Plus. I'm excited about one of the movies coming out in a couple of years, because I wonder if it's gonna be like the video game. It's called Star Wars Rogue Squadron, coming out in 2023 from Disney, and I'm going like, I'm super pumped about that because I was a big fan of the video game. So,
and that's another way to get someone interested in Star Trek is through media, like other media outlets, like video games, or like even like, I don't know. Sometimes there's references, like all the stuff about references to Star Trek. Like a lot of people know the Live Long and Prosper and Vulcan ears and tribbles. Like those are things that people recognize from Star Trek, and having those references can pique people's interest too. Like watching something funny and seeing a reference to Star Trek might be like something that actually piques their interest and be like, I'm gonna go watch Star Trek because I don't understand that reference, but everyone else thought it was funny.
Yeah, that's why all like the other shows kind of sprinkle other fandom references in their shows. Like, for example, The Simpsons, for example, which has tons of Star Trek references.
Yeah.
Like it's been dropped several times throughout its 33 years on the air. And like even some of the cast members from Star Trek have made appearances in Star Trek and in The Simpsons, like Leonard Nimoy, Patrick Stewart, that kind of thing. They lent their voices to characters who not necessarily are them, but they were in the show itself. Like Leonard Nimoy is the only person who's played himself more than once.
Yeah.
So in The Simpsons,
which is awesome, and it gets people. I think some people get really interested in that when they see like the random stuff that they've done, like seeing something like that where they're like, I want to know more about this guy because he's Spock, obviously, but also he's Leonard Nimoy, and it's something that's referenced often with his presence. So I think that also just gets a lot of people into the franchise when they see enough references or see that it's popular enough to just be there, and it's like, hey, that was a Star Trek reference, and people are like, what, really? That's kind of random and cool. Okay, I might watch the show because I want to understand the references too.
Yeah, and a most recent episode of The Simpsons referenced the Kelvin timeline films because J.J. Abrams himself made a guest appearance in a recent episode of The Simpsons, and I'm like, I mean, me, my wife, and my friend were watching the episode as it was on, and I'm the only one who got the references because it was J.J. Abrams. So it was really funny. I mean, out of the three of us, I actually was going like, oh, I know these references. It's like, because it's J.J. Abrams, and like I know these references. So it's like, and I had to like dumb it down for my wife and my friend to like say, okay, this is kind of like what he's talking about regarding his Star Wars films. He directed 2 of the Star Wars films. There's some of the Star Trek things he did. That kind of thing. Turn this into this big multimedia franchise. So which actually
some people get really pumped about.
Yeah, and exactly. And I know he wanted to do that after the very first Star Trek movie he did. So he wanted to explode Star Trek again. And it took a
I
few
think he
years.
did an amazing job because that's
Yeah.
how a lot of people I know got into it, was through those movies, the J.J. Abrams Kelvin universe spinoff, like
Hmm.
that definitely got a ton of my friends into Star Trek, or aware at least of some really like basic Star Trek stuff where they're just like, oh yeah, I know that storyline, or I know about Kirk and Spock and Pike and all this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
Khan. Like I understand now. Like
Yeah.
which I appreciate. Like,
Hmm.
and mostly the reason why I want people into certain stuff is just so that we can share like inside jokes and references about it, which that feels good to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I think it's good to watch because there's good commentary,
Hmm.
good like well-meaning stories, things you can learn from, and growing up with it, it's impacted me. But I also just love just being around people who understand what I'm talking about. It's like, oh, you know what I'm talking about. Nice. Like, feels
Hmm.
nice to have people understand the references that you understand.
Yeah, and that's how I feel about, I mean, that's how I feel like I want to convince people. It's like, hey, there's this cool science fiction show that you can get into, and then the two of us can talk and, get all these references and, talk about it like, as we were like, as we would talk like normal people, like you and I are talking right now, Kenzie. So,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. And there's like, oh, there's awesome podcasts about it. One of them is TC Trekkies. The other one is like, I like listening to Mission Log. I mean, because they're the one like those people who do that over at Roddenberry, like all those podcasts over there, like Mission Log, Daily Star Trek News, that kind of thing. Those are
Yeah.
my favorite
And that like
podcasts.
opens up, yeah, it opens up other media for people, like podcasts or video games, or
Hmm.
like spin-off things that are very similar, like being like, well, if you like Star Trek or you like spacey sci-fi exploration stories, maybe you should watch this show too. And I mean, it just opens up a lot of different content for people to be interested in it.
Yeah, and also opens up to the other science fiction franchises that are similar to Star Trek.
Yeah.
So series like The Orville or The Expanse. That
Yeah.
or yeah, the Amazon series The Expanse, or that or The Orville or
Mhm.
or Babylon 5 or other ones. It's like
Yeah.
they can all I mean, all science fiction spacey shows can coexist with one another. I mean,
Yeah, and that's what
granted.
I try to tell people. I'm like, watch it all. Like, I mean, if that's like your thing and you like it, like I'm gonna be a little bit of like the Netflix recommendation algorithm here and be like, maybe you should watch these too. Like, do it.
Yeah,
Like,
and
I
that's.
hear you like this. Try to watch this stuff too. And like Star Trek's usually in there with like,
Mhm.
oh, you like this type of commentary, or you like these types of story arcs. Watch this series. Do it. It'd be worth your time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I feel about, I mean, that's how I feel. It's like if you want like an action adventure of the week, which we're getting one of them now in Strange New Worlds, but we're also got the original series, Next Generation. I mean, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise. They all deal with the alien of the week or the problem of the week. Some of them do. I mean, like, but there's like most of their series do.
Yeah.
But then there's also like if you want some humor too with that, go watch The Orville.
Yeah.
It's because I see that all the time, the adventure of the week, but it's also really funny at some points too. Like, I mean, I see a lot of. I mean, granted, The Orville, in my opinion, is Seth MacFarlane's love letter to TNG. So
Yeah.
because it's very much like TNG, like you got a character who looks like Worf, you got a character who acts like Data, um,
Hmm.
and you got Ed Mercer who is just like Kirk with a little bit of Picard, and you got the first officer, Grayson. She's just like a little bit of like Janeway and Riker. So if
Yeah.
so it's that kind of thing, and you got the cocky helmsman who was you got
Oh yeah.
You got Gordon.
I love this, like they're kind of almost like these like stereotyped caricatures
Hmm.
of who they are in other series. Like they're very representative of like different characters throughout Star Trek. And that's why I like it. I'm like, I can see that this is very heavily based off of different characters throughout Star Trek
Oh
and
yeah,
kind of
totally.
capturing their spirits and like caricatures of people.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't wait for season 3 of the Orville, which they're saying hopefully by the end of this year. I mean, they've had some delays because of the pandemic, but now with Hollywood Productions having more protocols for contact tracing and testing for the virus, they've had a couple of hiccups, but they'll be coming back hopefully by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And speaking of other COVID related news, unfortunately, Strange New Worlds has had a positive test of COVID. There was an actor who flew in from Vancouver to be a guest star on a future episode of Strange New Worlds. He had tested positive for the virus. He had been in contact with some of the costume designers to some contact, so they're in quarantine, that kind of thing. But the production of the series was not impacted, thank goodness. So, but that's good news. But it's really kind of sad that, I mean, granted, it was bound to happen because you have 3 series of live action Star Trek, Picard in California, and then Strange New Worlds and Discovery in Toronto. So, or Strange New Worlds in Mississauga, and then Discovery in Toronto, which are next to each other, by the way, in case anybody wanted to know. They're roughly about, like, Mississauga is actually a suburb of Toronto. So so they have had a positive test of COVID, unfortunately, and it's really kind of it's kind of sad, but it was bound to happen, unfortunately, because I know certain other shows have taken pauses to in their production of this year because of the pandemic. So I mean, other show, so like one of the shows
inevitable.
It was inevitable. I like watching other shows, like, I mean, Young Sheldon, for example, the prequel spinoff of Big Bang Theory, which has a ton of Star Trek references, because Sheldon is a big fan of Star Trek. So I mean, it's like, it's really cool watching some of the Star Trek references in that show. I mean, like, because he recorded episodes of Next Generation and watched them. It was kind of funny to watch those and, like, seeing, like, oh, this is what he watched. This is cool. so that kind of thing. So
I had lots of people message me about watching that, like people trying to get me into shows like that because they're like, hey, they really like Star Trek and they're huge nerds and they like science, they're like physicists, and I'm like, you'd like that because you're going to school for physics and you like Star Trek and all this other nerdy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, why didn't you just name the show a Big Bunch of Nerds? It would have been better. But I like Big Bang. Yeah. I like Young Sheldon. But I do like the other references in other series. Like, they bring up, like, stuff from Star Trek and other shows. Like, there's an episode of Seinfeld. Like they talk about the Wrath of Khan and the search for Spock, and they make fun of it. And I like when Jason Alexander is in the cafe shop and yells Khan. So I mean, I love that whole episode of Seinfeld. I mean, like, those episodes of, like, other references in other shows that are not necessarily Star Trek, but they have references to them. It's like, oh, I like that. So I mean,
it feels good to be like, I understand. References do something to your brain that feels good when you can, like, connect the dots of finding something else that's like, I bet that's what they're talking about, or that's totally what they're referencing, and it's just this, like, brain feel good moment where it's like, wow, my brain understands that, and it just is such a weird, like, complex, like, feeling of goodness to understand what somebody's talking about. Like, I think deep down, that's all everyone wants, is to be understood and to be able to, like, make that connection with someone about any sort of content. So and that's, I think, why I think, like, groups are so popular where people are fan groups together, like getting people into stuff, like, that's like a huge deal. Like, people joining fan groups on Facebook, like, and making joke groups, meme groups for certain fandoms. Like, it's great. And that's also how I get it. I've had so many people this is another big one, is through social media. Like I've
Hmm.
had so many friends who get into Star Trek because of like meme groups around Star Trek. Like especially there's one, like, excuse the language, but Star Trek shit posting is an insane group, and it's so funny. And I've had so many friends who are like, explain this meme to me, and I'm like, okay, well, here's like the episode, here's what they're joking about, they're making fun of this, like,
Yeah.
and like just so many different ongoing jokes, and I love it. Like that is definitely one of the things where I've had friends be like, I joined this group and it's hilarious, and now I've been watching Deep Space Nine over because I see so many people talking about this thing, and now I'm really excited to watch Star Trek.
Yeah, totally. And that's, I mean, I'm not a part of that group, unfortunately, but that's because I'll let you know a little story about that. I used to run a positive fans of Star Trek Discovery group, and some of their members joined our group just to spam us.
Yeah.
So, and it's unfortunate. So it's like I had to, like, very seriously vet these guys who were gonna join our group, and then when they were doing something bad, like, it was a very positive group about all of the Star Trek franchise, the Star Trek universe, and I had to ban a few people. My messages to them ended up on their shit posting page. So
Yeah.
it's like, why you got banned? Here
Not
you go.
everybody who's into not everybody who's into the
Yeah,
same stuff have the same perspective on how
yeah,
it's perceived or how serious people take stuff.
yeah,
Like,
and yeah,
wild.
yeah, and that's how I got. That's how I. That's why I don't. That's why I have not joined that group, is because of that. But other things about, like, getting like fans into, like podcasting. Now that you and I are doing this podcast, I mean, I did a podcast before about Star Trek. I
Mhm.
ended up getting a lot of friends out of it on social media. Some of them are still who are my friends, even after what happened, about over 2 years ago now. But but some of them are still my friends, and you know, and I know that some of them I do want to meet sometime in person, someday in person. I would love to go to the Vegas convention, but now we're going to have, speaking of conventions, we're going to have Star Trek missions. So, if you heard
Mhm.
about that, Kenzie, at all? I
Yeah.
mean, we didn't mention it on the episode about all the First Contact Day news because I forgot about it. But we got Star Trek missions coming up next year. Hopefully, they'll be able to have in-person conventions if a lot of people get vaccinated between now and the end of the year. Um, it's going to start in Chicago in April of 2022. So I'm kind of excited. I would love for them to come to Minneapolis too, Mission Minneapolis. I bet you they will once once things settle down. So which I hope, I'm not. I want social justice, obviously, but
Yeah.
for what's going on in the world, especially up here in the Twin Cities, where we had like a couple of unfortunate killings of black men by police. But I just, I want social justice for them. So once that settles down and we get the justice that we want, I can imagine that the Star Trek missions people would actually do one here in Minneapolis. But I'm kind of curious to know what they would do at the convention center, probably, and probably
Yeah.
some other places around the Twin Cities, or maybe they would call it Mission Twin Cities rather than Minneapolis or Mission St. Paul. Maybe just call it.
Yeah.
Well, let's just call it Mission Twin Cities and have like places where they would normally have conventions, like the Hyatt Regency over here in
Mhm.
downtown, or the convention center and that kind of thing, and maybe have someone across the river over at the River Center, maybe. I don't know. So, or maybe have
Yeah.
someone at the X, who know, at the X Energy Center. So who knows? But I can imagine they would eventually come to the Twin Cities, but they're going to start in Chicago and then do one every year after that. So, which is kind
Yeah.
of nice. It doesn't, I mean, it saves the expense for people who don't have necessarily the funds to go to STLV every year. I mean, there are people who do. Like, I have a friend who lives in Vegas. She goes there every year. my friend Amy,
It
who's
makes it
in
more
Vegas.
accessible. It just
It's
makes
more
it more
accessible.
accessible to have it in different places across the country, and
Hmm.
it having a different format than like a very iconic like convention that people know. Like that can be intimidating. Like some people don't really want to go to conventions if they don't know a lot about
Hmm.
like Star Trek. Like I don't know if I would invite one of my friends who doesn't like Star Trek and get them into Star Trek by bringing him to a con. I'm not sure because like either they'd really like it or they would feel super left out and confused because they don't know anything,
Hmm.
and it would turn them off to it. So it's one of those things where if they're a little more laid back format and they're in different places and a little more casual and informal, it's an easy way to get people into it. Like bringing them to panels or like just seeing people dressing up, but it's not like the known convention that everybody talks about for Star Trek. Like that's like like the holy grail of Star Trek conventions. Like I think that's a little less intimidating to just go to more casual ones.
Yes. Yeah, and it's gonna save the expense for people who like for example, if I would want to go to the Chicago one next year, I mean, it's less of an expense to me to go rather than save up money for August and go to Vegas and go to their convention.
Yeah.
So, because I think it's less of a expense, you know, or like I said before in one of our previous episodes, I used to go to conventions all the time. I mean, when I was a kid, I used when they had Star Trek conventions here. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how I met Jonathan Frakes. So
Yeah.
yeah, so but I mean, we have the virtual ones now because of the pandemic.
Yeah, which
Like
I think is honestly a really great way to get
yeah,
people involved because it's like way less pressure on you
hmm
showing up a certain way and presenting yourself, and you can just kind of jump in. And that's my biggest thing is like I always want anything I'm trying to get anyone into should feel like they can just jump in. And Star Trek has been one of those things in my life where I've seen examples of it where it's not very easy to jump in, like the gatekeeping aspect of
hmm
some some topics of Star Trek or how people talk about Star Trek has definitely turned people off to be like, oh, I can't get in because the first thing I say when I talk about liking Star Trek is someone starts being the like, oh yeah, name 10 top 10 episodes from each series. And then everyone's like, yeah, I'm not into it anymore because that's what people do to me when
hmm
I even say I like Star Trek. It's like, oh, like means you have to have stuff memorized or something, or you have to know this like alien name, or you have to know this captain's like whole backstory. And I just have had friends where they're like, nope, I won't say that I like this thing or that I'm into it because to me, people who actually like it, like super hardcore, uh, almost test me on it when I see them or like think that I have to prove my worth. So I'm like,
hmm
yeah, that can be a little tough. Like, but that's I feel like that's loosening up quite a bit, and as the universe expands and there's more producers, there's more like the direction in the show on like how things go, it's become a lot more open to people rather than like the one and only Gene Roddenberry and his vision of Trek and anything else is not canon type of thing.
hmm
Like it's gotten way more open and accepting, and people can say I like Star Trek without being quizzed on
hmm
like proving that they know it, because liking doesn't have to mean knowing. And that's as long as you make sure that you don't do that to people, that's the way I would say you can always get someone into anything, is by making sure that they feel like they don't have to know everything there is to know about it to like it.
yeah, and that's where we should always strive to be. For us being you and I being like hardcore fans of Trek, we should try to encourage new people to explore the final frontier, so to speak, and enjoy Star Trek for what they are, for what it is, and stuff like that, without
Yeah.
having to feel that pressure, like you just mentioned about, you know, feeling like okay, name 10 episodes, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, all right, I think we're about wrap this up. Any final thoughts?
Well, just if you're even slightly interested in Star Trek, no pressure. But definitely, it's so easy to go on like Reddit or just to go online and look up people's favorite episodes or funniest episodes. You can pretty much find any aspect and commentary of a Star Trek episode out there. So
Yes.
that's my one way. If you're looking to jump in or you're unsure, look up. Hey, you're super into romances. Look up best romance arcs of Star Trek and watch those episodes, or look into it, or join a random group on Facebook to look at memes or people having discussions about episodes if you want to learn more.
Exactly. And also you can always talk to either one of us if you want to. I mean, we're just a small little fraction of the entire fandom. So feel free to reach out to us. Either let us know you can either message us on the Facebook page too. You can send a message to us. We'll gladly read your message about it. I mean, how do we get into it? That kind of thing,
Yeah.
It's just like, talk to either one of us. We would gladly help you out. I mean, we're not going to be pushy on you. That's one thing that I'm trying not to be, is pushy. So, it's like, you gotta like this too with me so we can talk. Like, no, I'm not gonna push you into something you don't like.
And I have people message me a lot just about things that I've talked about, like, hey, you mentioned you really liked this thing. Tell me more about it. Like, I get it a lot with makeup. I get it a lot with critters, clothing, thrifting clothes, particularly. Like, people messaging me to be like, I noticed you're really into that. Well, like, how did you get into it? And I'm like, Star Trek's another one that you can definitely hit me up and be like, hey, I noticed you're really into this thing. Why or how? And I am totally down to just talk a lot about it, because that's what I do.
All right. So preview of next week, episode 12. Wow, we're at a dozen episodes so far. The best two-parters of Star Trek, all the way from the original series all the way to Enterprise. Because we're just gonna stop it right at Enterprise, because Discovery and Picard are serialized. It's like a one episode after the other kind of thing. Doesn't make much sense to do a two-parter about that. Granted, there's one two-parter in Discovery, but it's part of the overall arc. But Picard has a two-parter as a season finale, first season finale. So Discovery did that, but there's part of the overall story. So until next week, take care and live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.